She didn't ask for food. She didn't beg for money. All she wanted was a place to stop shaking. Her fingers were raw from the cold. Her coat too thin to matter, clutching a cracked guitar case like it held the last piece of her soul. She stood outside a place where warmth was reserved for the wealthy. Crystal chandeliers lit up the windows behind her, where laughter floated on waves of wine and five-star meals. Inside, he was watching Lucas Harper, New York's culinary mogul. A man who built an empire one ruthless deal at a time was known for precision. Not pity, but something about the girl, how she stood so still in a storm, how her eyes refused to flinch, unsettled the silence inside him. He didn't know her name, not yet, and he didn't know her voice would crack open something in him that had been frozen for years. Lucas Harper didn't believe in fate. He believed in timing, numbers, and never repeating a mistake. At 48, he was the man you called when you needed to turn a failing restaurant into a gold mine, or when you wanted your name whispered across Michelin-starred circles. He dressed like power and walked like he owned the ground. But success came at a cost. Divorced, childless, and allergic to vulnerability. Lucas spent his nights in a penthouse where silence was louder than applause. His empire glittered under city lights. But inside, he lived with no music, no laughter, no softness. The man who used to sleep on a borrowed couch now signed seven-figure deals over truffle risotto, but he'd buried that boy deep and built steel walls around the grave. Miles away, Sienna Rose was 17 and already tired of surviving. Her life had been a chain of doors that never opened. Orphaned at 6, she'd shuffled between foster homes like a forgotten package, unclaimed, unopened, unneeded. She didn't talk much. People didn't usually stay long enough to care. But she sang. Her voice didn't come from her throat. It came from bruises and dreams and the memory of her mother's lullaby. The last gift she'd ever received was a dented acoustic guitar and the words, "Never let the world make you quiet." So she didn't. She sang in subway tunnels, under bridges, on sidewalks that looked away, when her foster placements ran out and the system closed its door. She slipped into the city's cracks, sleeping on benches, washing in gas station sinks, and clutching that guitar like a lifeline. She had no address, no backup, no plan B, but her voice could hush a crowd and make a stranger stop walking. She never expected it would make a man like Lucas Harper stop breathing. The night was cruel. Wind whipped down 54th Street like it had something to prove, and the city's golden towers offered no warmth to the girl sitting outside their gates. Sienna stood beneath the glowing sign of the Ivory Flame, the most exclusive restaurant in Midtown Velvet Rope. Wait lists 3 months long, and a dress code that cost more than her life's possessions. She didn't plan to sing, not here, not tonight. She just wanted to stop shaking. But the doorman had other ideas. "You can't sit here," he snapped, eyes darting at the approaching valet line. "Go somewhere else." "I'm not begging," she said. Her voice was low but steady. "I just need to be warm. 10 minutes. I won't make a sound." Inside, Lucas Harper had just sent back a risotto for being 5 seconds overcooked. He ran a tight ship, and the Ivory Flame was his masterpiece. No distractions, no noise, no mistakes. He heard the commotion by the entrance and stepped into the foyer, ready to restore order. What he saw instead was a girl who looked like she belonged to another world. Her cheeks were raw from cold. Her coat didn't even close properly. And yet, she didn't flinch under his stare. Something in her stillness tugged at a place inside him he thought had long gone numb. "Let her in," he said. The maitre d' blinked. "Sir, she can wait by the prep hall. 10 minutes, No one questioned Lucas Harper, except the girl. Why she asked softly. He didn't answer. Not really, because no one should freeze for pride. He turned and walked away, already regretting the detour. But before he disappeared into the kitchen wing, he heard it. A note, soft, fragile, like breath caught between fear and courage. Sienna had sat down on the hallway bench, pulled the guitar from her case, and because she didn't know what else to do, she sang. The first notes barely rose above the ambient noise, but then her voice began to climb, pure, untrained, unapologetic. It slipped beneath the swinging kitchen doors, spilled into the dining room, and stilled every fork mid-air. Lucas froze. That voice. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest in a way he hadn't heard in decades. It was a wound singing to itself, a soul remembering how to breathe. He turned slowly, drawn back down the corridor like a man waking from anesthesia. When she finished, the restaurant didn't erupt. It didn't need to. There was only silence, the rarest kind, the kind born from reverence, and in that silence, a man who thought he'd heard everything realized he hadn't heard anything that truly mattered in years. Lucas couldn't forget her voice. He tried. He buried himself in back-to-back meetings, wine tastings, inspection reports, but every time a spoon clinked against porcelain. He heard her. Every time the restaurant lights dimmed, he saw her thin coat, cracked guitar, and a voice that made millionaires hold their breath. So, 5 nights later, he went looking, not through press releases or hiring managers, but through subway platforms and street corners. That's where she lived. That's where her music breathed. He found her under a flickering tunnel light, singing to a handful of tired commuters and a toddler who clapped too early. She stopped mid-verse when she saw him. "You," she whispered. Lucas didn't smile. He just nodded. "You remember? You let me sit," she said, "and then you left." "You sang," he replied, "and I haven't been able to unhear it since." There was no small talk, no flattery, just an offer. "I want to give you a chance," he said. "A real one. Paid, warm, safe, regular shows at the Ivory Flame. Food, training, a place to belong if you want it." Sienna stared at him like he'd just offered her a map to the moon. But then her expression shifted, shadowed, guarded. "I can't," she said. "Why?" "I don't have clothes. I don't have anywhere to shower. I don't even own a phone. You don't want a homeless girl singing to billionaires?" He paused, then said, quietly, "That's the only kind of voice that makes them listen." He offered her a card. "If you show up tomorrow at noon, we'll make the rest happen." She didn't take it, but the next day, she came. What followed wasn't magic. It was hard. It was messy. Lucas arranged for her to stay in a transitional women's shelter, clean, safe, but unfamiliar. He hired a vocal coach who didn't sugarcoat. He brought her clothes that fit, shoes that didn't blister, and food that didn't come from a can. Sienna didn't know how to accept help. The first night she cried in the shower just because the water was hot and endless, but she kept showing up every day. She trained, she wrote, she learned to hold eye contact again, and finally, the night came. Her debut. The Ivory Flame was packed. The kind of crowd that usually whispered about caviar pairings, but tonight, they waited, curious, skeptical, until she stepped onto the small, dim stage. No flashy dress, just black slacks and a blouse that didn't scream for attention, her guitar across her chest, hands trembling like bird wings. She took one breath, then sang. Her voice wasn't bigger, it was truer. Every note carried a scar and a reason to heal. Her lyrics weren't polished, but they were personal, about nights on benches, about dreaming with an empty stomach, about singing because silence hurt worse. The room went still, then softer, then reverent. By the final chorus, some had tears, some had goosebumps, and one man, standing in the back, had both. When she finished, the applause didn't explode. It rose like a tide. That night, Lucas didn't see a girl from the street. He saw an artist, not because she had talent, but because she meant every word she sang. Hey, in the weeks that followed, Sienna became more than a novelty. She became a name. People came for her, socialites, journalists, even a former Broadway director. Her songs raw, aching, undressed, spread across whispers and feeds like wildfire. But success has its shadows. Regulars at the Ivory Flame began to complain. It's too loud. She draws the wrong crowd. This isn't what fine dining is supposed to be. Lucas's partners called meetings, presented numbers, brand concerns, risk reports. You brought street music into a sanctuary. One of them accused, she's changing the fabric of the place. Lucas sat silent, then said, good. They didn't agree, so he made a decision that would cost him everything safe. I'm opening a new venue, he said, one where her music won't have to apologize. Lucas called it the Ember Room, a supper club built not for status, but for stories. It wasn't gilded like the Ivory Flame. It didn't serve caviar flown in from Paris or wines with decades in oak, but it had something rarer, a stage built for voices that didn't come from money. Building it meant selling off half his shares, cashing in decades of equity, and walking away from partners who once toasted him like royalty. They said he'd lost his edge. He said he'd finally found his purpose. Sienna was there through it all, helping design the acoustics, tasting dishes, writing new songs from memories she'd never thought she'd share aloud. On opening night, she didn't tremble. She walked onto that stage in a midnight blue dress and bare feet. The lights dimmed, the crowd hushed, her fingers touched the guitar, and then she told her story, not through explanation, but through melody, through verses about lost mothers and found chances, about the coldness of streets and the warmth of being seen. Her voice soared, and when the last note faded, no one moved. Some wiped tears, some simply stared, but every single soul in that room knew they had just witnessed more than a performance. They had witnessed a resurrection. The Ember Room became more than a venue. It became a movement. Young artists from foster homes, shelters, halfway houses were invited to share their stories on that same stage. Some had raw voices, some had poetry, some just had courage. Sienna and Lucas started a foundation called Open Notes, offering mentorship, safe housing, and scholarships to underrepresented talents. They didn't promise fame, just a fighting chance. And years later, as they stood together under the warm lights of the Ember Room's anniversary gala, surrounded by dozens of young artists they had once been, someone handed them a microphone. Lucas looked out of the crowd. He smiled, not the tired smirk of a mogul, but the quiet, full smile of a man who'd finally come home. This all started with one song. He said, "One girl, one freezing night. I thought I was helping her, but the truth is, she saved me." Sienna took his hand. Her voice was steady, strong, but her eyes shimmered. "Music didn't give me a stage," she said. "It gave me a reason to believe the world wasn't done with me yet." And with that, she turned to the newest performer, a 14-year-old boy with trembling hands and a notebook of lyrics. As he stepped into the light, Lucas and Sienna stepped back into the dark, where all real beginnings start.